What is the diasporan experience like?
It was a shock.
Identity is at the core of us. We cannot talk about parenting without understanding the backdrop that underpin that parenting.
We're getting more educated and losing our own essence.
If we cannot be proud of who we are, that leads to some form of dislocation with our own selves. Hello everyone. Welcome to Diasporan Mum, a podcast where we explore the experiences of parenting in the diaspora, where we traverse cultures, where we think about our experiences and juxtapose that against those of the countries where we now belong. So, what is Diasporan Mum all about? This is something I've wanted to do for quite some time. It comes from my own experience and something that I feel will add value to the community of the diasporans across the globe who have to navigate the same experiences that I have. So what is that experience? I was born and grew up in a completely different culture in Nigeria. And as a young mother, I migrated to my current home in the UK. At that time, my son was just about 3 years old. And I thought that I understood everything it meant to parent because, of course, parenting is what you do. And I had been parenting my child from when he was born. But in this new culture, there were experiences. There were lots of things that were new. And in so many ways, it really was about trying to traverse cultures in a way that I had never imagined or thought about. So, we know that there is a large population of people who live in the diaspora. And what is a diaspora? There are different meanings. In its original form, it talks about those who were dispersed into different countries. But in a modern context, and what research today will talk about, is those people who live in a particular country where they call home, but who still align themselves to the origins, to the roots where they came from. So in a sense, they live in two worlds. And the diasporan experience is one where you understand that the two worlds, while they may have exactly the same goals, hopes, aspirations, which we all do as human beings, is very much rooted in different experiences, values, what we call culture. So, I grew up in a culture where there were certain ideas, experiences, expectations about how you bring up a child. And in the country that I now call home, where I live and where I brought up my kids, there are also a different set of values and experiences that also come to the fore. And I think it is that in-between world that I want to explore in this podcast. Because if I'm being really honest, the word diasporan is one that I don't like a lot. Because in my mind's eye, what I see is the dispersal, you leave everything, you're kind of dispersed and you're kind of like a seed or a floating, cotton board or feather or something, just filtering, looking for somewhere to land. And as so many people who have been in the diaspora know, that is exactly how it feels. That shock of leaving all of the known and trying to find roots implanted somewhere else. And for a lot of us, that experience can lead to a lot of dissonance because you are trying to find a place that you call home, the place of the known, where you feel safe, where you feel secure. And yet, in so many ways, that is not what it's going to be. All of the things that you take for granted are completely forgotten, and you learn a completely new experience. On the other hand, motherhood is all about the known. Motherhood is about, the safe space. That place where you can be yourself and you feel completely at ease with yourself. It is really, for me, about rootedness. So in my mind's eye, when I think about Diasporan Mum, it is this experience of being completely dispersed, not being situated in a place, and this other experience of motherhood, we should be grounded in rootedness. So what is a diasporan experience like? So for me, for example, the very first time I left my country to go to the UK, even the weather was a shock, which I don't think will be, at all surprising to anybody who lives in the UK. But for me, it was a shock because I'd never experienced that before. And that shock of what do I wear? Something as basic as what is the right thing to wear becomes really big for an adult who ordinarily should know what is the right thing to wear. Where should I go and shop? So that in and of itself is a really surprising feeling as a diasporan. And then, as I said, come back to motherhood. Motherhood is something that nobody teaches you. It is one of the really big, important things of life where you're given this bundle of joy. And it is your responsibility to nurture, inculcate in this young person all of the values and the principles that you know, all of the skill sets that you know. Take them around the places and the histories that you want them to know. Form them into this person, this individual that will thrive, that will be a whole new being. And they are relying on you, the parent, to do this. They are relying on the assuredness of what you say, of what you do, of the decisions that you make. So in any context, motherhood, parenting is always a challenge, whether you are in your culture or not, because of the sheer, enormity of the task that you have. And yet, as a diasporan mom, or as a diasporan parent, because actually this is not just about moms. I speak about a diasporan mom because I speak from my experience and I'm a mother. But I don't think that experience is different for anyone, whether you're a dad or a mom, an auntie who's trying to help support the whole entire village. And talking about villages, I grew up in a culture where it takes a village. That wasn't just a phrase. It really was what it was. And the idea that you have support, you have parents, you have aunties, you have cousins, you have uncles, you have a school system, you have faith-based systems, all of whom support you in bringing up this child. And I was familiar with that village. I understood that village. And when you come to this new culture, all of a sudden you don't know what that village is. You can't just run around the corner to mom or dad or uncle and ask a question to say, how do you do things here? And so, how do I start to build this new village? How do I understand what the support systems are in this village? And in so many ways, also navigating this space, this in-between, where this new village does not necessarily understand me and my values and my perspectives and my way of doing things. So back to culture then. And that is really critical because, as I was trying to say earlier on, as a mother, nobody gives you a script to say this is how you mother. You are mothered, you grow up being parented, and when you become a mother, you draw on all of those. So if my mother did this, if the village around me did this, then that's what I'm going to do. And if I'm at all uncertain or in doubt, I go back to that village and ask them for support and insight for what I need to do. A very renowned person, Wangari Maathai, who was the first female Nobel laureate and environmentalist, talks about culture as coded knowledge. Culture is almost like what is in your DNA. It goes way back to a time and a season that you cannot even recall. But all of that knowledge, all of that history has grown up with you. And so when you step out and you talk about your culture, it is rich, you're infused with it. And you can speak confidently about that culture. And you can hopefully bequeath to your child that same culture. And yet in the diaspora, you are in the in-between. Because while you are the place of safety that your child comes to discuss and navigate what they need to do, you are also learning. So in so many ways, you are trying to unravel a coded culture that you do not really know, that is not in your DNA, and you're trying to understand. And so many times there is a clash. There are conflicts, and you're wondering, what do I do? What is the right thing to do? But beyond that, there are also hegemonies around culture. So which is the right culture and which is the wrong culture? Which is good and which is bad? So if in my own culture, parenting is done in a particular way, this is how we do things here. And in this other culture, this is how things are done. And that is a more dominant culture. It's a culture that is supported by the huge media, literature, everything around you. You can begin to doubt yourself and to think, what do I do, for instance, about bathing? You know, should I bathe my child in the morning? Should I bathe them in the evening? It sounds really small and simple. But it becomes quite critical when you're trying to navigate this world. And one of the really fantastic things about mothering, but also one of the biggest challenges, is that this little bundle grows. And as the bundle grows, they become their own person and they start to challenge you as well. They try to traverse this world they find themselves. And they're also navigating these two worlds with you. And oftentimes, they are challenged by what you're telling them in the home, which you're drawing on your own culture from, and the culture they meet out there for how things are done here. And unless you are stable and you are confident to give your child that safe space to feel a sense of worth in the identity and the culture you bring to them, you could have cultural dissonance in the child. Times when children feel cultural cringe because they feel that perhaps the food you gave them isn't quite the right kind of food. And they begin to feel a sense of shame, embarrassment, which of course goes to the very root of identity of the person who they are. And then sort of think about when you go and speak to teachers and you're trying to navigate that world as well. So there are so many things that as a diasporan mom is very much at the core of who you are, what you do. Managing that uncertainty, projecting confidence when you are not confident, not entirely sure where to find the right kind of support, how to build your new village. And I just wish that in the time that I was navigating this space, I could find somewhere I could go for answers. I could go somewhere where there were resources that I could use, that there was a community, a village, online, in person, wherever, where I could engage with these issues to try and find a new way of being. Because at the end of the day, the idea is that diversity brings strength, that I should be able to draw on the culture that I come from and also draw on the culture in the space that I now am in. And that it builds this tapestry, beautiful tapestry that strengthens. But so many times, because we don't have the spaces to do that, we end up having this feeling of sometimes just confusion, sometimes challenged about your own worth and your own identity. And now that I've kind of navigated that space, and I go back and I discuss with my own child now, who is now an adult, and I explore some of the things I did, hearing from his perspective, and also other perspectives, because it's not just about me. This is a space that I have navigated with other parents, other moms, where we've had chats as I've gone along. I really think that there is a lot that we can bring together, that we can explore together. A lot of what Diasporan Mum will be about will be exploring these themes asking questions, looking for resources, learning from our own lived experiences and our own stories, but also drawing from the rich literature or research that is out there that we can draw upon. And from that, I will be drawing upon my strength as an educator, as a researcher, which is what I do in the day job, to bring to the discourse some of those key ideas, key themes that we can explore together in a way that we find solutions or answers or tools that are acceptable, that resonate, that builds up, that ensures that we're bringing these little people up to thrive, not survive, that they do not have to navigate a space in which they do not understand themselves, which can then lead to all sorts of challenges, including mental health challenges. I do not think that it is unconnected that, for instance, in the UK, when you look at the data on people suffering with mental health, that a lot of young black kids, young black men, are the highest rate of people who suffer from mental health. And when you explore that a bit further, research shows you that some of that is about trying to find themselves and who they are, and finding spaces in which they understand what it really means to be a black man. When you look at the research around subcultures that are created, sometimes it's about young people in the diaspora trying to find identity in who they think they are, because they do not see themselves easily in the dominant culture or environment in which they find themselves. And yet, if we're able to pull together all of our resources and find a way in which we can make this person, this child, feel safe in their own identity and embrace the culture in which they find themselves and draw on the strengths of that culture, they can become this real whole person that can thrive. So that is my heart for Diasporan Mum. That is what I really want to achieve with this podcast. So how am I going to be doing this? We're going to be having series where we explore these from storytelling, reflections. I'll be having interviews with individual experts, but also with people from lived experiences and groups. At the very beginning, we'll try to explore what the big themes are. So I'm talking about what I have known, what I've understood, what are my experiences. But I'll also be drawing from the voices of other parents in the diaspora. The other thing I really want to do is that this must be a space that is inclusive. Yes, as I've said, I'm a Nigerian mom. I live in the UK. But I would like to explore and see how this experience is for so many other parents from different cultures, from different countries. Because the diaspora is growing. The number of people who are moving to countries that new homes, especially in our globalized world, that they call home, is constantly growing. And the literature, the research shows that a lot of the discussion around the diasporan experience is about a south-north migration movement. And as I said earlier on, there are already questions around dominant hegemonies and how people see themselves relative to the places that they're going. There are narratives in the media, there are narratives in the educational system that they all have to navigate and understand and walk through. So I would like this space to be inclusive, that it is not just about black moms or black fathers, but it's about the entire diasporan experience. And I think that there are lessons that we all can draw and learn from each other. So welcome to Diasporan Mum, a space for all of us to build together. Welcome to Diasporan Mum, a space for all of us to feel safe, to build a new community, and to expand and explore that community as we go along. Thank you.